Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Jeremy Knauff here with me today. How you doing, Jeremy?
Cedric, I'm doing awesome. How about yourself, brother?
I'm doing absolutely swell. Absolutely swell. I like that background there. It's nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Looks like you're sitting in a sauna.
Well, then I guess we're glad I have clothes on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been a part of our media campaign over the course of the past week, and especially this weekend. We've had a lot of special things going on. If you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or any of the other socials, you know I've had a lot of things going on. So I want to say thank you. Thank you to the community that we're growing. And thanks to all the people who contribute to this broadcast right here, America's Next Motivator. So I want to say hello to all of you. And without further ado, get right into it. Jeremy, where did you grow up?
Well, I started off in Illinois, but then moved down here to Florida relatively early. And we were down here from sometime in kindergarten until the time that I left for the Marine Corps. So I would say I'm generally a Florida native.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old were you when you moved to Florida?
Oh, that's a good question. How old are you in kindergarten? I can't even remember. That's got to be 4 or 5.
You're 4 if you made the cutoff. You were 5 or 4 years old. Okay.
Yeah, I think we came down around the middle of the year. And then we bounced back and forth a few times, and then we just stayed down here from then on.
Did you notice any sort of a cultural difference? Any sort of a climate difference? Let's go.
Well, climate, yes. We certainly have various seasons up north. We have hot or hotter down here. That's about the extent of it.
Right.
Culturally, I don't know that. I'm sure that it was different. I don't know that I really noticed anything culturally different, though, at that age. I don't know that I was really aware enough to notice anything. I mean, a bunch of 5-year-old kids are a bunch of 5-year-old kids pretty much no matter where you are, I think.
Right. Okay. What was going on in your family at this time? And what was going on in your family before you were even born? What was the legacy? What were the tradesmen? Who were the professionals? What was the context?
Yeah, so we had kind of an interesting mix of people in my family. Historically, we've got a lot of veterans in my family. We've got a lot of firefighters, some cops, a lot of people in the various trades. For those of you who I know in my family.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Sorry. So, for anybody that's grown up around firefighters, particularly, I would assume maybe it's the same with cops. They're not paid all that much, so they tend to have a second job at least, if not a third job. And at least in the circle that we were in, most of the people that had second jobs were in the construction industry. So I got a chance to be exposed to a lot of different things at a pretty young age, and learned how to do a lot of things that it seems like a lot of men don't know how to do these days, building things, all of that kind of stuff. So I think it was a lot of opportunity to see a lot of different perspectives and learn a lot along the way.
So can you talk to me about some of the things that you learned possibly from other men in your life at a young age? Give me some examples of the types of things you were learning.
Well, I mean, the obvious one would be anything related to construction. I have what a lot of people would consider a gift. There's pretty much nothing that I can't fix. Okay. And part of that was because growing up, I saw a lot of that type of stuff taking place, right? My father, in addition to being a firefighter, also had a side job in the construction field. And a lot of times on the weekend, we didn't have the money for a babysitter back then. So Jeremy would get drug along to the construction site, and I'd have to either make myself useful or find some way to entertain myself. So in doing that, I learned how to do a lot of things. I learned how to build things. I learned how to take things apart. But more important than that, I think, was I really saw firsthand, even though I don't think I realized it at the time, but I saw firsthand the value of hard work, right? You get a lot of people, and this is not an age thing. A lot of people think that this is a problem with millennials. I don't think it is. I think we have people with this problem of all ages, and that is they just don't want to put in the work that's necessary to get where they want to go. And this was something that I saw. I mean, my father would go and work a 24-hour shift at the fire station. And then when he got home on his day off, he'd go to the construction site and do what he had to do there. He's working on the weekends. And then you've still got all the things around the house that have to get done, the little handyman odds and ends kind of projects and the mowing the lawn and all of the things that just happen with being a family. So I think that seed was set at a young age, even if I didn't realize it yet at the time, that hard work it's not something to complain about. It's not something to be upset about. It's just a thing you do. And if you're going to go out there and do something if you're going to do something large enough to actually contribute value into the world, that's just going to be part of the equation.
That's right. We've got to have conversations around embracing work ethic, the work ethic that's needed for anybody to go out there and do something, especially if it's going to be something new. If it's going to have any sort of novelty to it, you're going to have to break through a couple glass ceilings. And so you're going to have tough skin. You're going to have to be able to dig deep, and you're going to have to be able to grunt it out. Did you have a metal Tonka truck or what?
You know what? I actually did. The giant yellow dump truck one. Is that the one you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I think at that age, I'm not sure. How old are you, Cedric?
I'm 32.
Okay. All right. You're a bit younger than me. I'll be turning 45 here shortly.
Okay.
But I think pretty much every boy, at least around my age range, and so it sounds like your age range too, had one of those. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming there's something deeper behind that question, though.
No. I like to paint pictures. As we're talking, I want people to be able to place themselves in that point of your life. Now, for those people who've never had a man who was handy, who worked on construction sites, who was able to do carpentry, work a grill, plant a tree, and trial a sidewalk all in the same day, they won't understand the privilege that you had of interacting with these different gentlemen. And so I want to talk a little bit about the beauty of concrete. You know, I'm sure at some point you realize the artistry, the masonry that goes into creating the structures that you and I walk on every day. You know, did you ever develop a love for masonry, laying the concrete, the process of paving a driveway, for instance? Did you develop a love? Did you acquire an appetite for the crafts of manhood? Go ahead.
Absolutely. I maybe to an unhealthy level, I think sometimes. So to put that in context, I was actually just building a built-in desk in the office area for the kids to set up their computers. Mm-hmm. And as I got everything set up, like I've got this lip around the edges of the wall where the desktop will sit, and then there's a cabinet that's going to be in the middle that supports the center of the desk. And I got everything in place, and I'm measuring it out. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, no, that cannot be. Measured it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Damn it. All right. So this whole thing is off by 1/8 of an inch, off of center by 1/8 of an inch. Now, nobody's going to know that except me. Had I not said anything, my wife would have never noticed. The kids would have never noticed. Nobody walking into the house would have noticed. I mean, we're talking about a span that is like 113.5 inches. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to notice a 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch off on that. But I did, right? So that's the level of attention to detail and passion that I have in this stuff. It's like, you have to do it right.
That's right.
It just seems like a small mistake. It seems like a small difference, but those small differences are really important. I mean, think about it from the perspective of, let's say you're sailing on a ship and you're 1 degree off course. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but over the span of 300 miles, you could be on a totally different island than where you were originally planning to go. So the little details really make a huge difference, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I definitely want to draw this out into a greater symbology of life.
Yes.
the carpenter who has no problem with being off by an eighth of an inch is different from the biggest and the best carpenters out there in the world. Somebody who's okay with being off by an eighth of an inch, they're mediocre at best. They're not the person who you want to call to build your custom entertainment system in your living room. Because if you're an eighth off here and you're an eighth off there, guess what? Your whole system's going to break in a year or two. And so let's talk a little bit about perfection. What are your thoughts about perfection? Do you think that perfection is possible? Do you think that there are ethic instances like these where no, you fix that eighth of an inch that allows you to achieve perfection? What are your thoughts about perfection?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of that, there is no such thing as perfection. You're not going to have something be 100% perfect, right? You could do something as close as humanly possible to perfect, but you get 10 experts to come in there. Every one of them is going to find something that's a little bit off. But as men, as professionals, as leaders, it's our responsibility to try and get as close as humanly possible to that. Because like you said, the little mistakes, they add up over time. Now, I think I have kind of a unique perspective when it comes to this stuff, because I grew up in a family of, my father was a firefighter. We had God knows how many firefighters on both sides of the family. There was a bunch of cops there. And then, of course, later in life, I served in the infantry in the United States Marine Corps. So from a very young age up until, my early 20s, it was hammered into me, whether it was intentional or not. It was very intentional in the Marine Corps, probably not so much as I was a kid growing up, but all of these environments were places where little mistakes didn't just make something ugly, or they didn't just make something difficult, but they actually got people killed. So that's a world where mistakes have life and death consequences. Now, out here in the civilian world, I run a marketing agency. Nobody's trying to kill me. Mistakes are not going to get anyone killed, but they can still have dramatic impact. So if I do something wrong and it impacts a client's bottom line, that may mean that they have to let some people go, or that may mean that they have to shut their business down. And
that's right. Yeah. I'm thinking a little bit differently about this eighth of an inch.
Let's hear it.
Again, it's very special when you have men who have this sort of impact on you when you're a young man. A lot of men out here don't have it. And so I want to take this opportunity to provide a victorious moment for our publics. As you talk about the eighth of an inch, right? And how, let's say in a place like the Marine Corps, that eighth of an inch is very, very, very serious because lives are on the line. In the civilian world, I'm looking at industries like foster care, the education system, the medical system, and I'm thinking, how many eighths of inches are we looking over as a general society? Because maybe it's okay to overlook that eighth of an inch. And I'm being inspired by Jeremy Knauff here today, reminding us that in his own life, he doesn't ignore that eighth of an inch. And so what we've got to do, if we're listening and we're learning to our environments right here inside this hour on America's Next Motivator, is pay attention to that eighth of an inch. Where's that eighth of an inch in your life? Circle back to it. It's that eighth of an inch that's causing you to not strike your goal directly on the head. It's the eighth of an inch that's causing you not to hit the bullseye. And see, hitting the bullseye is what people want. It's what your employer wants. It's what your customer wants. If I'll tell you guys a brief story. We got a comment in the building. Hey, Yolanda Riley, how you doing? I like to take my clothes to the cleaners. And the fact of the matter is my creases need to be specifically in the middle of wherever I wanted to crease at. So if I wanted my sleeves creased, then that crease needs to be in the middle. If I want my pants creased and pleated, those creases and pleats need to be exactly in the middle. If they're off by an eighth of an inch, not only am I never going to that cleaner service again, but I'm extremely upset. And so we've all got to adopt this mentality that the eighth of an inch is where we need to hone in and correct ourselves, seek correction. Now, can you talk to me about an instance in your life where you needed some correction and maybe your father or your mother, they were able to step in and help you to address your own personal eighth of an inch?
All right, so I'll touch on that in a second, but before I do, I want to back up for 1 second, and I want to touch on something that I think is really important here. And we're talking about 1/8 of an inch, but where this becomes a bigger issue for people is, oh, well, it's just 1/8 of an inch, and then next month 1/4 of an inch is okay, and then the next month 1/2 of an inch is okay. So you create this pattern. So that's a huge reason of why this is so important.
That's huge. That's huge. Go ahead.
Right. So as far as correction from my father or mother, for that matter, there wasn't a lot of that really, because we didn't have a great relationship when I was growing up. Things are great now, but for whatever reason, things were very difficult back then. We did not get along. So we did not see eye to eye. There was a lot of conflict. I actually moved out of the house at 16. So I was working 2 jobs, renting my own place at 16.
Wow.
Until I left for the Marine Corps. So I don't have an experience like that, but I did learn a lot. I did experience a lot from just indirect or direct observation rather than direct, mentoring or teaching or things like that.
Is it possible? Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What was your question?
Is it possible that the adults in your life, in their own, engulfment in their activities and their lives, they wanted more perfection out of the kids, maybe out of you, and was frustrated at the fact that you were just a kid or that you were just a young man? And I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
I have a cousin whose father used to burst into the room every morning at 4:45 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't matter if you're 10 years old. Doesn't matter if you're 12 or 13 or 17. You need to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you need to do a specific job. Maybe you're tagging along with him for the day on a concrete site or a construction site or whatever. But after about 2 or 3 years of that, he's expecting you to be able to do things to a certain level. So if he says, you know what, today we're going outside to fix brakes, he's not going to stand there with you, unbox the brakes, get under the car, and show you how to take the nuts and bolts off. He's going to tell you to change the brakes and walk away. And when you can't do that at 12 years old, it's extremely frustrating for him, which could cause, a disconnect between a child and a grown-up.
Yeah. So I don't know that was necessarily the case. What I think is, I think it was a general frustration about life, right? Like I said, we didn't have a lot of money. He was working all the time. He was really getting no breaks. I have to imagine we've never had the conversation, but I would have to imagine that he was, frustrated, stressed out. I mean,
okay,
that takes a toll on you. And ultimately, look, like, we all do the best that we can in any given situation. So maybe he wasn't equipped to deal with all this at that time. There's no hard feelings about it. It's water under the bridge. We get along great today. But ultimately, in not having those kind of examples, like, I didn't have somebody that I could really talk to or that I could ask advice or things like that. I found other sources to get that. So I did a lot of reading as a kid. I looked at, a lot of people who had done significant things in the military, or, famous explorers, people who had gone out and done impressive things and contributed massive value to the world in some way. So because I didn't have that in my life, rather than just throwing my hands up and saying, well, I guess this is just how life's going to be, I chose to seek it out and find it through other sources. And that's where I think a lot of people get it wrong, is when they don't have what they want in their lives, they just decide that, well, this is just what my life is, so screw it. When in reality, if you don't have what you want, it's up to you to get out there and find it through whatever source you could possibly find it through.
Absolutely. That's a strong piece of encouragement for young men and women clear across America today. Were there any books that really stuck out to you that you could recall today? And who did you look up to? Who did you look out and say, I like this example of a man, or I like this example of a woman? Who were some of your influences? And what were some of the books that you read, let's say going into high school or during your high school years?
Yeah, so I read a lot of military books. There were stories, all the way back from, World War I and World War II, all the way up to back then. The most current war at the time was the first Gulf War. But there was just some amazing stories of men who had done incredible things in the military. from before I was born up until then. I also had, at that time, I had a manager at a job that I worked at. I think I started working when I was either 13 or 14. I had to fill out a stack of paperwork about that big just to even legally do it at that age.
Right.
But it was a family friend, and he was willing to kind of, go through the extra hassle. So I had that job, and he was, in addition to being the manager of that grocery store that I worked at when I was about 13 or so, he also happened to be a coach on some sports teams, some of the like PL league type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a really good role model. Unfortunately, he passed to cancer a few years ago. But I did have that. I had a lot of the people throughout the military history that had done amazing things. I also looked at various business people. You had a question?
Let me ask you something. Yeah. What was your favorite military story? I think that's a great point to come out of our episode today, is that military stories could teach you a lot. There are books like The Art of War, 48 Law series that deal a lot with war stories. There's so many different parallels and lessons can be taken out of war stories, military stories. What's your favorite military story?
I have to say there's a ton of them, but I think one of the ones that was most impactful for me was actually fairly recently. You ever heard of a guy named David Goggins?
Yes.
Okay. His story is just the most incredible thing that I could say that I've heard in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about this aspect of it a little bit more as we get into this, but I was going through some incredibly difficult things when I first stumbled across his book. And I did the audio version, and I've probably since then listened to that audio book at least 30, 40 times.
Wow.
Because he has just gone through so much. And when you listen to his story, so I imagine you've read the whole book or listened to the whole audio book, right?
No, I've not listened to him. I know that he's an author though, but I've not listened. Nope.
All right. So this guy is an absolute beast. He's a black guy. He went through some, racism type issues when he was younger, and he was super overweight and dropped like 120 or 130 pounds, something crazy, to even get into the Navy. He didn't know how to swim. He had to go through all kinds of crazy stuff to make that happen. Actually, I take that back. He was in PJs, then he went over to the Navy SEALs. He went through BUDS 3 times. And just, it's like every time that he talks about something that he did, it's like, okay, that's the absolute pinnacle of, overcoming adversity. And it's like, nope. Then I went and 10x this. I blew it up, and, if we can do this, why don't we go and try this, 10 times harder.
Right.
So that was a really powerful story from the perspective of overcoming adversity. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not equipped to deal with today, right? Something goes wrong, and all of a sudden it's, oh my God, my life is terrible. Everything's over with. I'm just going to give up and sit down and cry. So I think that's a really powerful story, because he ties in a lot of different aspects. There's the military side of it, but there's also the personal side as well. And he's very good at telling the story in a way that's powerful and engaging. So that's one. There was a particular story, I don't remember all the details now, about this other particular group of, it was a Green Beret team during the first Gulf War. And it was one of those missions where just everything that could go wrong did. And they just kept picking up and adapting every single time. It was like everything went completely the opposite of what they had planned, but they just kept picking up and adapting and finding new ways. And I just think that's one of the biggest things that any of us can do, is figure out how to build ourselves up to a point where we're able to handle adversity like that, where we don't think it's the end of the world, where it's just, oh, okay, well, this is what's going on. How do we adapt to this and solve the problem?
It's extremely important that we have a hands-on approach to life itself. None of us should sit back and allow life to happen to us. The gift of life is that life is not happening to you. You are happening to your world. And that's something that we need to do on purpose. You need to make sure that you take effect in your world by manifesting your destiny, by manifesting your heart's intent for the world and for the life that you live. Life is a verb in a matter of speaking. It's something that you need to engage in, and there should be no such thing as my life is happening to me and woe is me. That is the mentality that is a perfect opportunity for coaching. It's a perfect opportunity for you to watch America's Next Motivator, and it's a perfect opportunity for you to take a step into the next chapter of your life, because the life is happening to me mentality is it's what keeps people in survival mode and unable to get out of survival mode. Now, when you were 16, you were effectively in survival mode. You had to figure out how you were going to get into adulthood successfully. Did you know that you wanted to go to the Marines or the military at 16?
I did. I had made that decision. I think it was either my freshman or sophomore year. So that was set. I had already signed my contract. It was done. There's a program that they call the delayed entry program. Mm-hmm. And basically what you do is you'll sign up, and then you do things with a group of other people who are going to go in every month, once a month or something. And you go and you PT and you drill and you do all kinds of very lightweight type of Marine Corps stuff. It's nowhere near what it's like in the real Marine Corps, but they're kind of getting you acclimated for what it's going to be like. So while I was in high school, I was going through all of that. At the time, I actually worked 2 jobs. I told you about the grocery store that I worked at. My parents, I guess, were trying to get me to come back home. So they went to the manager, who, like I mentioned before, was a family friend. Mm-hmm. And they asked him to cut my hours. He did. Wow. They did not know that I had a second job. So I just picked up the slack over there to keep the money coming in so that I could stay out there. But along the way, I kept doing all of the things to get ready for the Marine Corps. I was constantly out running, swimming, doing all the things that you have to do there. And that was kind of how that played out.
Did your mother not want you to go to the service? Did anyone not want you to go to the service?
I mean, yes and no. It's one of those things. Like I kind of feel the same way. If my kids grew up and wanted to go into the service, I would be proud and honored that they wanted to go. But at the same time, as a parent, you want your child to be safe. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a dichotomy, really. I know that they were scared. I know they didn't want me to go, but they also knew that I was a man and I was going to go do what I was going to do, just like many other people in our family before had done. So they knew that it wasn't anything that they were going to change my mind. So the decision was made at that point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Jeremy Knauff. He is a determined man on a mission. And his journey doesn't stop where we are now. So what I want you guys to do is sit tight, grab a sip of water, and we'll be right back with more from Jeremy Knauff. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network and our viewership. We're back. Jeremy, how you feeling out there?
Outstanding. How about you?
I'm doing great. Listen, right back into it with some intensity. I want to say hi to everybody who's out there in the audience tonight. If you're dropping comments or if you're listening along, I just want to say I appreciate you. We've got 444,000 youth in the foster care system today. Many of them are going to find themselves isolated at the age of 16. They're going to be figuring out, how do I become an effective adult? Some of them are going to consider the military. What did you gain from your experience in the military? What was it like?
Wow. That is there's a lot to unpack in that question. I gained so much, and there was so many different experiences. When I first got into the military, I had the idea that I was going to be in there for life. I figured, wow, I'll do at least 20 years. So I'm just going to completely lock into this, and this is my world. I got in, and while I certainly loved a lot of aspects of it, there were certain things that turned me off in various ways. Okay. I remember a particular thing that I found especially frustrating for me was there was a particular unit that I tried out for in the Marine Corps. It's called Recon. It's basically, think of it like the Marine Corps' version of the SEALs. It's a special operations unit. So I went in, and to put this in context, so first of all, I forget what the exact number is. It's somewhere between 1% and 2% of people even begin to even serve in the first place, right? So out of our entire population, 1% to 2% of the population ever serves in the military, period. Okay. Then within there, you've got a smaller subset of the people who do an infantry type of job. And I don't know exactly what that percentage is, but it's probably somewhere in the single digits. Okay. Then within that group, you have an even smaller subset, maybe 1% there. And that's the special operations community. So I had decided that's what I wanted to do. I took this what they call an indoc. Basically, you go through this massive physical and psychological test, we'll call it, where they basically just beat the hell out of you, not physical, not like punch you, but it's like crazy things that you have to do, like swimming that would drown most people, and carrying heavy packs and just walking or running. You've got navigation, you've got all kinds of different military things, but at a very, very high level. So we got the subset of the subset. So we had a group of about 80 to 100 people that tried out for this unit. 3 of us ended up passing. Right. And for whatever reason, at the very last minute at the board, where you're basically standing in front of a panel of other people who are already in that unit, asking you questions, I decided that I didn't want to do that. And I don't know why I decided that at the last minute. It was just kind of a split-second decision. But for whatever reason, I made that decision. And then I regretted the hell out of that from the second that the words came out of my mouth. And I spent the next couple of years in the Marine Corps trying to get back into that unit, trying to get another opportunity to try out. But because I was very physically adept, I could run faster, I could carry heavier weights, I could do things that other people couldn't do, and I was very technically adept. I was able to handle all kinds of equipment, deal with the high-tech stuff like our radios and our cryptography equipment, as well as fire a weapon very proficiently. My unit didn't want me to go, so they would not allow me to go retake this indoc and have an opportunity to go over there again. So eventually I got to the point where I got very frustrated and just decided, all right, I'm done. I'm going to finish out my 4 years and just call it a day. But during that process, I did have the opportunity to learn a lot, experience a lot, pick up some great stuff from some amazing mentors, and some really big life lessons. For example, up to that point, I always had the mindset that if you just work hard and do everything you're supposed to do, people are going to notice and you'll get promoted, and you just follow this path. Right. The reality is it's nothing like that, right? You have to absolutely crush it, but you also have to be able to promote yourself in a non-douchey way, right? Right. So I remember this particular day where I had I was managing, in addition to all the infantry stuff that I had to do, I was also managing some administrative stuff for my unit. And one of those was something called the MCI program. Now, this is a correspondence learning course for the Marine Corps. There's topics on pretty much anything you can imagine.
Okay.
Now, I think it was a Lance Corporal at the time, which is an E3. So you got private, PFC, Lance Corporal. That's where I was, which is pretty much the bottom of the food chain.
Okay.
And I remember we had this change of command ceremony. And our new captain had come in, and I had never met the guy before. And he calls me into his office. Now, mind you, he had this big booming voice. Sounded kind of like Mufasa from The Lion King, right? So he would talk and it would just echo out across the room. And he calls me into his office. He's like, hey, Lance Corporal Knauff, go ahead and get the MCI program documents and meet me in my office. So I grab everything. I come in there. And he's like, all right, we're going to change this. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And go ahead and let's make this happen. Now, I looked at him and I said, no, sir, we're not going to do that. We're doing it this way. Here's why we're doing it this way. And then I just shut up. And he stared at me for what seemed like an eternity with that intense Marine Corps stare. And it gave me plenty of time to sit there and think about what a huge mistake I may have just made. Mm-hmm. And he then looks at me and says, all right, Lance Corporal, seems like you have this under control. Do it your way. And that was a little bit of a red pill moment for me.
Hold on.
Let's hear it.
This moment right here is absolutely huge.
Yes.
At that moment, you told life what was next. And that ties into everything that we're talking about tonight. At what point do you begin to speak to your life as opposed to only your life speaking to you? When you begin to speak to your life, when you begin to coach your life, move your life in a direction that you wanted to go into, then that's when you begin to become an adult. See, if you're never speaking to your life, if you never get caught controlling your life, you never get caught steering your own boat, then you're always just sitting there waiting for somebody to pick up the reins and move you how they want you to be moved. But when you begin to talk to your life and move your life the way that Jeremy is doing here, then that's when you actually get the access. Life itself gives you the key to manifest your dreams. It gives you the key to unlock the gate of your dreams. I'm feeling like you had an epiphany. Your heart spoke when your heart spoke when you were on that recon platform. You could have went. You were the top guy. And for the people who don't quite get it, there are levels in life. I know we don't always want to accept that there are levels in life, but there are. It's just that way. And so where Jeremy was the absolute top of the top of the top. And in that moment, it became more than just rigidity. It became more than about stricture and structure. It became about his heart. And his heart was possibly telling him that there are other phenomenal things for you to do in your life. I said other, not that it was better or worse, but there is something else that's also phenomenal. And if you are the best in the world on this platform, where else can you be the best in the world? Where else? And so now the military, it seems like something that's very, very understandable. You exceed everybody's expectations physically. You exceed most people's expectations mentally. And now you are prepared. You're fully prepared. This is what the military did for you. It prepared you to take charge of your life. So now what happened for you after you left the military? And did you leave with honors?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I got out and I started my first business. And so in the past, I've always described it as I started a business that was a little bit too forward thinking in a small town. The reality is that's a BS answer because small town means nothing. So the short version of what happened was I started a web development company in a little tiny town called Spring Hill. I think there's maybe 30,000 people in the city as a whole city, which is tiny. I started a web design company there in 1999. back then, a lot of people, most people, in fact, still thought that the internet was just going to be a fad.
Wow.
So yeah, it just did not take off. Now, like I said before, when I was younger, the answer I gave was that I started this in too small of a town too early. The reality is, if I really was committed to it being successful, I could have found ways to make it work, whether that be getting better at sales, whether that be calling on businesses in bigger cities that understood the importance of this. So ultimately, the failure was on me, but it wasn't lost because I gained so much from that. I learned so much from that experience, not just about business, but about myself and how I think and how I operate and how certain things affect how I perform or how I react. And that knowledge was priceless. I could not have bought that. I could not have gone to college and learned that. There's no way to gain that knowledge outside of actually experiencing that massive and devastating loss. So while it completely tanked me financially, it destroyed my confidence for a good period of time, and basically caused a hard reset on my life. That was something that I wouldn't trade for the world. Just like my stupid incident of changing my mind at the last minute on the recon thing. Like all of these things, I look back and there's some degree of regret, but at the same time, there's tremendous value that came out of them. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I spent the next several years kind of recovering from that, both financially and emotionally. After a while, I knew that eventually I was going to start another company. And in order to do that, I was going to have to get a lot better at sales. So rather than just sitting around and hoping and waiting, I went and I found a commission-only sales job, and I went and worked there.
Wow.
This particular company was actually owned and run by the Church of Scientology, which, if you know anything about them, it's kind of an interesting organization.
Okay.
And they had this sales process refined to such a level that if you were to walk into their sales room, it was like that old boiler room kind of sales type of scenario like you had back in the 90s. And if you were to walk in and you would listen to one of the sales reps on the phone talking, they had these little phones for each of the pods. I think it was like 6 or 9 groups in the room. And if you were to walk up, in the center of each group was a phone that you could pick up and tap into anyone's extension and listen in on the call. So if you were to walk up and listen to what one of the sales reps was saying, they had the process so refined that you could almost say verbatim what that prospect on the phone was going to say in response to that salesperson. They had it just so dialed in. So there was a lot I learned there, built a lot of great connections, just really upped my game there. Go ahead.
I want to chop some of this up because I feel that so many young people, whether they're fresh out of college or even sometimes fresh out of high school, they have this big idea that, I can go somewhere and I'm going to be the big fish in the small pond, and I'm going to get a phone room just like they did on the movie War Dogs. And in that phone room, in that small town, I am going to, acquire 30 or 40 penny stocks, and then I'm going to take over the world. and you realize that, the world is so big that it's like, no, big head, it's not going to go like that. But welcome to class. Welcome to the class of life. And this is where, all of the early mornings and all of the construction work you did when you were too young to even be on the site, and all the stuff that you learned as you grew up, all this stuff comes into play now, because now it's so easy for you to quit. Nobody's over your shoulder anymore.
Yeah.
Now you're really out there on your own 2 feet. And it's those moments that really build character. I find that a lot of us are at this point where you might call it rock bottom for different reasons, variety of reasons. But I think this is the moment right here where we're all relatable. Because what did you do when you hit rock bottom? When there was no one there guaranteeing your success, when there was nobody hitting the bell for you to know what to do next, what did you do from there? For one, you'll realize that the learning curve was huge, but you learned a lot. You learned so many things that now, guess what? Now you're authentic, right? You become a totally new person once you hit rock bottom. And I think that before then, we're so impressionable by everybody who's good at stuff, but you're never really authentic unless you hit rock bottom. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a really important facet to this that I think most people don't consider. And that is when we're in that position, whether it's we are young and we're getting ready to go out into the world, or we've hit rock bottom and we're trying to rebuild, or even just things have gone pretty well and now we want to take it to the next level, whatever it is. So there's two components here. One is we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So everybody has these huge things they're going to accomplish, but they don't take the time to think about all the little steps they have to do to get there. So that's one component of it. The other side is we're all looking at the people who are already there, and we're comparing basically their highlight reel to our entire story, where and when we look at our own story, we are usually incredibly self-critical. So we are tearing ourselves to shreds for every little mistake we've ever made and not giving ourselves credit for what we've accomplished. Perfect example. So I see a therapist. I think everyone should see a therapist. There's tremendous value in that. Helps us get out of our own way and see things that we don't see because we intentionally blind ourselves to that. I had a situation, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, during this, where I basically had a health crisis almost kill me. And I spent about 2 years on my deathbed. And I was talking with my therapist at some point after that had happened. Now, at that point, we were still going through whatever the health crisis is. It's something we haven't fully figured out and fixed yet. That's been going on for about seven or 8 years now. But I went from being on the deathbed to being on stage speaking in front of a crowd of, about 100 to 200 multimillionaires. And she had asked about this particular event because she knew it was coming up and asked if I had pictures. And I shared some with her. And then I immediately, as soon as she hands the phone back to me, I start talking about whatever the next thing was. I don't remember what the details were, but I was talking about whatever my next thing that I was working towards. And she's like, whoa, slow down, back up. She's like, are you taking a minute to acknowledge yourself for what you've accomplished? I was like, no, that's over with. That's done. We're on to the next thing. And this is a problem that we have, is that we don't really, and this applies to almost everyone, we don't acknowledge what we've actually done, but we tear ourselves apart for our failures and our mistakes. So you take those two components, right? We're overestimating what we can do. We're looking at everyone else's highlight reel while tearing ourselves down. And that puts us in a really bad spot. So we have to change that if we want to get up to that next level.
Absolutely. We've learned a lot from you today. I think that there's something here for everybody. And I've really heard some great things. Now, you said you became a speaker. I find it very inspirational that even though you've had health concerns that left you on a deathbed, you got up and you said, let me speak to others. Let me help other people grow their business, 10x their business, and become better entities. And so let's talk about your entrepreneurial endeavors today. What businesses do you run today, and how's business going for you?
So I run a company called SPARTAN Media, and basically it's a full service digital marketing agency. But what we focus primarily on is we take people who are an expert in their field and we actually transform them into being a recognized authority in their industry. So you may have somebody that's worked in an industry for 5, 10, 20 years, and they are just brilliant. They know everything there is to know, or as much as somebody can know. And they're the person that solves everyone's problems. But most of the people don't realize it. So what we do is we help them get featured in the media. We help them build a social presence. We help craft how they're perceived online and take them from being wherever they are to being the recognized authority that then the media wants to start regularly reaching out to and asking questions and citing them in television and in publications. They start having speaking opportunities. Customers start coming to them. That's what we've been focusing on a lot lately.
This is absolutely huge. So for all of the entrepreneurs out there, all the people out there who are building a business and want to become more of an authority in their industry, they can come to your company to assist in that.
Absolutely.
Who can people call? What number or what website do people go to if they want to do business with you?
Yeah, if you look up SPARTANmedia.com, that's my website. And then if they specifically are looking for authority building, just go to SPARTANmedia.com/authority. And there'll be a form to get in touch with us from there.
What is the role or the priority of social media in authority building?
So social media plays a really important role in that, because that's basically your day-to-day communication with your audience. So everything that you're posting on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything should serve to communicate your expertise. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be boring and dry. I certainly get out there and push boundaries. I'm comfortable saying things that other people maybe are not. But when you're communicating, everything you're saying in a post, in a video, in an article, wherever you're putting your content out, should play a role in conveying who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What's the future of social media, do you think? I'm sure you guys look at the social media piece as, a main factor in somebody being an authority. For instance, a lot of people, they have a Facebook page, and you go to that Facebook page and you can't tell what they do for a living. That like really threw me off when I got on the phone with somebody maybe 6 years ago. And they said, I'm looking at your Facebook page and I can't tell what you do. And I'm like, you mean to tell me you can't tell I'm a speaker? And it's like, no, I can't, because nowhere on your page does it say that you are a speaker, right? And so I think that we all need to get in tune with those times. Your social media needs to say what it is that you do so people can get it, right? But what do you see next? What's next in social media from your perspective?
So Clubhouse is a huge thing right now. I actually wrote an article about it in my column in Entrepreneur. I think it was a few weeks ago. That's going to be huge. I think part of that came because of this whole COVID pandemic lockdown. Mm-hmm. People were just kind of craving that connection with other humans. So Clubhouse, if you're not familiar with it, is basically a drop-in audio social media app. You pop in there, you can talk in real time with other people. Think of it kind of like networking mixed with a talk radio program. You can create your own rooms. You can pull people up on stage to speak, or you can just kind of go on a monologue and talk about whatever. People can pop in and out of the rooms. They can raise their hand if you want to give them that ability. Basically, it's a really powerful and engaging way to connect with other people. But the most powerful thing about this, in my opinion, is how it kind of levels the playing field. So I've had conversations with Grant Cardone, Forbes Riley, Damon John, like just people who prior to this you would have had no access to whatsoever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is the website obsolete now?
No, and it's not going to be anytime soon. The website is always, at least for the foreseeable future, is always going to exist, right? Because that's going to be a repository of information. The way I look at it is, you want to look at your website kind of as your home base. And then all of your other social media is just other things to drive people into your home base. Okay. We're never going to be at a point where we just rely purely on social. We've already seen how that played out. I know when MySpace first came out, everybody said, oh, websites are dead. Everyone's just going to have a MySpace page. And now MySpace is pretty much dead. It exists, but nobody uses it. Right. And then, you see the same issues with Facebook, banning pages, banning ad accounts, banning profiles, all kinds of things. So to rely on an external third-party site or source is incredibly dangerous from a business perspective. What we want to do is we want to leverage those platforms, but not rely on them. Absolutely.
I think it's absolutely key to capture an audience on all different social media platforms, but bring them back to your home base, which is your website. Ladies and gentlemen out there, build a website, develop a network, capture email, and provide value, grow your business. Jeremy, I got about 3 questions left for you. We got about 20 seconds left in the show. My first question, what is survival to you?
Survival is just putting one foot in front of the other. You know, when I went through my health crisis, that was pure survival mode. I just lived my life 5 minutes at a time.
What is success to you?
Success is doing what you're passionate about without having to be overly worried about, you know, the other things that you have to do, right? Like, we're running a business. If we're successful in that business, it should run well, kind of semi-autonomously. And our main focus is providing value in the world, not just getting bogged down in all the day-to-day details.
What is greatness to you?
Greatness is contributing value that goes above and beyond yourself, right? A lot of us, we put too much energy into how much am I going to make out of this deal, or what's this thing going to do for my fame, or things like that, when the reality is we should be looking at it from the perspective of, you know, who can I help, or how many people can I help by doing X, Y, Z, whatever mission we choose.
That's right. The time is upon us. The time has been upon us, ladies and gentlemen, to lock arms and help each other in all different verticals of humanity. Jeremy, I want to let you know that I've listened to your story today. I found many parallels that I was able to use. Hopefully everybody else did too. We're giving you your respect today while you're still alive, and we're giving you your crown today while you can still receive it. Ladies and gentlemen, put your crown emojis into the chat. Ladies and gentlemen, put your crown emojis into the chat. We are letting you know, letting the world know that you, Jeremy Knauff, you are America's next motivator.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You got crowns coming into the building. Thanks for stopping by today, all right?
It's a pleasure speaking with you today, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, talk to you later.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator is going to have something here for you. All you got to do, just like you did today, stop by and pick it up.